Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's get right into it. Have you ever had a glass of wine and just wondered, why does this taste so different from that other one? Well, today we're going to uncork that whole mystery. And our journey, believe it or not, starts with a single bottle from a place you probably wouldn't guess. And this is where it all begins. It's that simple thought, right? That moment when you try something new and you're just like, I like this. It's a moment of pure discovery, and it's what kicks off a whole universe of questions. So that bottle I mentioned, it was an El Acero Zinfandel. And get this, it's from Mexico's Valle de Guadalupe, down in Baja California. And you know what? It's the absolute perfect jumping off point for us to dive into the huge, super diverse world of what we call New World wine. Okay, so the big question is, how does a Mexican wine like this actually stack up against its famous neighbors? Well, you can see right here, Mexico is not a one-trick pony. It can have that jammy, almost salty coastal vibe that reminds you of California, but then it's also got these high-altitude vineyards that bring a kind of elegance you might find in South America. And when you put that next to, say, the super bold, spicy Malbecs from Argentina or those big, oaky Cabernets from California, you start to see that every single one of these regions has its own unique personality, and it's all because of where it's from. Which leads to the obvious question, right? Why do they taste so different? I mean, if you take the same grape, a Cabernet for instance, and you plant it in Mexico, and France, and Chile, why don't they all taste the same? Well, the answer goes way, way beyond just the grape itself. Okay, let's get into the why behind the wine. The whole secret really comes down to a couple of key ideas that pretty much define what a wine is. And honestly, if you get these, it's like learning the basic grammar of the wine world. Everything else just clicks into place. So first up is this really important French idea called terroir. And what it really means at its heart is that a wine tastes like where it's from. We're talking about everything, the soil, the climate, how the sun hits the hills, all of it. People call it the somewhereness of a wine, which I love. It's like a liquid fingerprint of a very specific spot on Earth. And you know, for hundreds of years, France has basically been the gold standard for this. They absolutely mastered the art of pairing the right grape with the right climate. You know, putting Pinot Noir in cool Burgundy or Cabernet Sauvignon in the milder Bordeaux. They literally wrote the playbook that the rest of the world either copies or, has a lot of fun breaking. But what happens when that somewhereness is pushed to the absolute limit, to the extreme? Let's do a quick lightning tour of wines born from fire. Yeah, I'm talking about wines forged by actual volcanoes. Just look at this. These 3 volcanic islands take what should be a terrible place to grow grapes and turn it into a massive advantage. Over in Gran Canaria, you've got high altitude plus these Atlantic winds, and boom, you get these rustic, smoky red wines. Then you hop over to Mount Etna in Sicily, where that same altitude factor produces these incredibly elegant, complex reds that people are always comparing to pricey Burgundy. And then there's Santorini. So hot, so dry, so windy. And it creates these intense, salty white wines that literally taste like nowhere else on the planet. It's amazing. But look, terroir, that sense of place, is only half the story. The other, equally important half, that's us. Human ingenuity. It's the science, the craft. You could even call it the technology of winemaking. I mean, how else do you explain taking the exact same ingredient, grapes, and ending up with things that are complete polar opposites? And for this, France gives us the 2 most perfect examples you could ask for. On one side, you've got champagne. That is the technology of bubbles, right? It creates this crisp, refreshing, celebratory drink. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got Sauternes. This is the technology of sweetness, using a very specific fungus to make one of the richest, most incredible dessert wines in the world. They couldn't be more different, and it's all thanks to how we handle the grapes. And speaking of champagne, those bubbles aren't just pumped in like a can of soda. No way. They are literally born inside every single bottle. It's this incredibly detailed process. First, they make a regular dry wine. Then, they add a little sugar and yeast right into the bottle to kick off a second fermentation. That's what makes the CO2. But then, and this is the magic part, they let it sit on the dead yeast cells, which they call the lees, and that's where you get those amazing toasty, bready brioche flavors. It is an absolute art form, and it takes a ton of time. So, as you can probably guess, an intricate, time-consuming art form like that, well, it isn't cheap. And that actually brings us to another huge question about wine, one I know we've all wondered about. Why does the price jump up so much, so fast?
Here's the thing about wine prices. They don't go up in a nice, neat, straight line. Not at all. It's more like an exponential curve that just shoots upward. Down at the bottom, your $5 to $15 wines, that's all about industrial production, just getting volume out the door. But as you start to climb into that $15 to $40 range, you're paying for better work in the vineyard, more quality control. Then you hit that prestige level, maybe $40 to $100. And now you're paying for serious labor, hand harvesting, aging in expensive oak barrels, and really low yields, which just means they're making a lot less of it. And then, at the very, very top, it's all about scarcity and reputation. The rules completely change. And that right there, that's how you end up with bottles that cost over $1,000. At that point, the price has almost nothing to do with how much it costs to make the wine. It's a totally different game. It's driven by pure rarity, what the top critics say, and let's be honest, the status of owning something that's become a true icon. So, okay, let's step back for a second. When you put all of this together, the unique fingerprint of the land, the incredible science, the centuries of history, and this crazy economic curve, it really makes you wonder, what is a glass of wine, really? What does it represent? Here's a fun little thought experiment. Imagine aliens show up, and they look at our smartphones and our rockets, and they're just not impressed. They're like, yeah, your technology is cute. What could we show them that would really blow their minds? You could make a serious argument that our most advanced technology isn't in Silicon Valley, it's in our wine cellars. I mean, think about it. It's this mind-blowing blend of geology, biology, chemistry, and pure art. And this is exactly why you can't just whip up a bottle of fancy wine in a lab. It's not going to happen. Why? Because a single glass has over 1,000 different chemical compounds swimming around in there. It's basically a living, breathing system. It's created by this wild, dynamic process of fermentation, and it gets stamped with unique mineral and microbial signature of its home. And then it keeps changing. The chemistry inside that bottle slowly evolves and transforms for decades. It's literally the chemical signature of a place and a time captured in a bottle. So back to our alien visitors. If we had to pour them a tasting flight of planet Earth's greatest achievements, what's on the menu? Well, we could kick things off in Europe to show them our mastery of bubbles with champagne and precision sweetness with Sauternes. Then we'd head to North America for Canadian ice wine, a true feat of cryogenic tech, freezing the grapes right on the vine. From there, South America, to show how we use extreme altitude to shape flavor. Then Africa, to showcase our skills in literal grape engineering with Pinotage. And we'd finish in Oceania, with a wine that demonstrates our genius for preserving incredibly bright, vibrant acidity. I mean, every single glass would be a showcase, a total marvel of human ingenuity working with nature. So that brings us back to the big question. Is a glass of wine the truest, most complex expression of our planet? It's a bold idea for sure, but just think about it for a second. It's this perfect collaboration between earth, sun, and rain, all filtered through thousands of years of human culture, science, and artistry. It really is a liquid story, a story of geography and time, just sitting there in your glass. So the only question left is, what story is your next glass going to tell you?